The emergence of the P-51 Mustang was not merely the result of an American engineering breakthrough, but a response to a global crisis, demanding fast, effective innovation. By 1940, the skies of Europe were dominated by Luftwaffe fighters like the Bf-109, and the Royal Air Force, though valiant, was overextended. Britain's air defense system had held during the Battle of Britain, but the RAF desperately needed a capable fighter to sustain offensive operations over occupied Europe and to escort bombers deep into enemy territory. Their existing aircraft, such as the Spitfire and Hurricane, were formidable in defense but lacked the range for strategic offensive missions. British procurement officials were actively searching for alternatives, including from American manufacturers. At this crucial juncture, the North American Aviation (NAA) Company proposed a bold idea. Rather than license-produce the outdated Curtiss P-40 as initially requested by the British Purchasing Commission, NAA President James H. Dahmane, Dutch Kindleberger, and his team suggested developing an entirely new fighter from scratch. The proposal was audacious. They promised a functional prototype in just 120 days. This timeline seemed improbable, but the British agreed, driven by the urgency of war and NAA's reputation. Design work began in earnest in April 1940. Led by Chief Engineer Edgar Schmuid, the NRA team adopted a streamlined, data-driven approach. Drawing from lessons in aerodynamic efficiency and cooling system innovations, they conceived a design that would eventually become one of the most effective fighters of the war. The core concept emphasized speed, maneuverability, and especially range, an underappreciated aspect of fighter performance at the time. One of the Mustang's most groundbreaking features was its laminar flow wing, a product of wind tunnel testing in collaboration with the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACA. This wing significantly reduced drag and allowed for higher speeds and longer ranges without a proportional increase in power or fuel consumption. Additionally, the aircraft's radiator system utilized the Meredith effect, converting waste heat into thrust, another factor enhancing its range and efficiency. The original engine choice, the Allison V1710, was suitable for low-altitude performance, but the aircraft was not yet the legendary Mustang known to history. Nonetheless, the design team pressed forward, committed to proving their radical blueprint. Their efforts converged in the XP-51 prototype, a sleek, aggressively contoured monoplane unlike anything else flying in American colors at the time. While initial expectations within the U.S. military hierarchy were modest, the Army Air Forces had not prioritized the Mustang for domestic use. British urgency sustained the project's momentum. The RAF placed their first order for 320 units before the prototype had even flown, an extraordinary demonstration of trust in the design process and in the capabilities of North American aviation. By October 1940, the first Mustang was complete, an impressive feat given the constraints and deadlines. In a world teetering on the edge of global conflict, this aircraft symbolized not just industrial ingenuity, but strategic responsiveness to the evolving nature of air warfare. The development of the P-51 Mustang was thus not an isolated engineering story, but the direct consequence of a world at war, a response to a desperate need for a fighter that could shift the balance in the skies of Europe. What followed was a rapid transition from blueprint to airframe, driven by transatlantic collaboration and a shared goal to take the war back to the heart of the Reich. But before the Mustang would prove itself over Berlin or in escorting bombers across the continent, it had to undergo its first trials in flight, tests that would determine whether its promise was grounded in fact or fantasy. That stage began with the prototype and the proving grounds of the American desert. The XP-51 prototype's first flights in late 1940 marked the transition from an ambitious design project to a functional warplane. Initial testing occurred at Mines Field, California, where North American engineers and British observers evaluated the Mustang's handling and performance. The early flights confirmed several of the design team's predictions. The laminar flow wing produced exceptionally low drag, and the radiator's Meredith effect offered a measurable boost in thrust at higher speeds. Test pilots reported the aircraft to be stable, responsive, and faster than most contemporary American fighters at low to medium altitudes. However, the Allison V1710 engine revealed its shortcomings. While reliable, it struggled to deliver power at altitudes above 15,000 feet, a critical disadvantage for European combat where engagements often occurred at far greater heights. Despite this limitation, the British remained confident in the Mustang's potential. They envisioned it primarily as a low-altitude tactical reconnaissance and ground attack fighter, roles where its performance remained competitive. To refine the design, additional prototypes were built and subjected to a rigorous testing regimen. Engineers addressed cooling challenges, experimented with armament configurations, including combinations of 50 caliber and 30 caliber machine guns, and fine-tuned the airframe's weight distribution to improve maneuverability during tight turns. The aircraft's official testing phase expanded in 1941 when the RAF began evaluating the first production examples, designated Mustang Mky. British test pilots noted the Mustang's excellent range and speed at lower altitudes, with a maximum speed of over 370 miles per hour at 15,000 feet. It could also outdistance most RAF fighters of the era, with an operational range exceeding 750 miles, making it ideal for long patrols over occupied Europe and the English Channel. Still, performance above 20,000 feet remained unsatisfactory, leading to ongoing debates within British and American circles about the aircraft's ultimate role. In the United States, the Army Air Forces showed little immediate interest in the Mustang as they prioritized other fighters like the P-40 and the developing P-47 Thunderbolt. However, the aircraft's strong test results and British enthusiasm began to shift opinions. By mid-1941, the U.S. agreed to conduct official trials at Wright Field, Ohio, to assess its suitability for American service. These evaluations confirmed many of the RAF's findings, particularly regarding speed, agility, and efficiency at lower operational ceilings. The transition from prototype to production was rapid, driven by wartime urgency. North American streamlined its assembly lines, introducing manufacturing innovations to speed output without sacrificing precision. The first RAF Mustangs entered service by the spring of 1942, where they immediately began flying low-level reconnaissance and ground attack sorties over northern France. These early combat missions validated much of the data from testing. The Mustang excelled at long-distance patrols and could evade or outmaneuver many German fighters when engagements remained below 15,000 feet. However, as Luftwaffe aircraft increasingly engaged at higher altitudes, particularly around bomber streams, the Allison engine's limitations became more pronounced. Engineers and military planners began to explore solutions, leading to discussions with Rolls-Royce about integrating their Merlin engine, a modification that would ultimately redefine the Mustang's capabilities. Before that transformation, though, the early Mustang had already established itself as a vital, if specialized, tool for Allied air operations, proving that the P-51 project was more than a rushed experiment. These early operational successes and testing insights set the stage for the Mustang's formal adoption by American forces. The next chapter in its history would see the aircraft transition from a specialized British tool to a cornerstone of Allied air strategy, as it entered broader service and began to prove its worth in more varied combat environments. The Mustang's entry into formal service began with the Royal Air Force in 1942, as the first Mustang Mky units were assigned to Army Cooperation Command. Their primary missions included armed reconnaissance, low-level interdiction, and tactical ground support. These roles took advantage of the Allison-powered Mustang's strengths, its speed and range at low to medium altitudes, while avoiding the high-altitude combat for which it was poorly suited. RAF pilots quickly learned to exploit the aircraft's aerodynamic efficiency for hit-and-run attacks, often sweeping deep into occupied France to disrupt German logistics, strike convoys, and photograph troop concentrations. The Mustang's ability to operate far beyond the range of most British fighters gave the Allies unprecedented intelligence coverage and harassment capability in territories that had been largely beyond their reach. By late 1942, the aircraft had drawn increasing attention from the United States Army Air Forces. While initially skeptical, American commanders began to see the Mustang as a solution to a growing problem: the need for long-range escort fighters to protect bomber formations conducting deep strikes into Germany. At this stage, however, the Allison engine's altitude limits meant the Mustang could not yet fulfill that role effectively. Instead, early American-operated Mustangs, designated P-51 and later P-51A, were deployed in secondary roles, including tactical reconnaissance in North Africa and the Mediterranean. Their service during Operation Torch and subsequent campaigns demonstrated their ruggedness and versatility as they supported advancing ground forces and conducted raids against Axis supply lines. Pilot impressions of the Mustang during these initial deployments were overwhelmingly positive regarding handling, range, and speed at operational altitudes. Its cockpit layout was considered more comfortable and ergonomic than many contemporaries, and its stability in flight made it suitable for inexperienced pilots transitioning from trainers. However, frustration remained over its inability to perform effectively in the high-altitude escort role so desperately needed over Europe. American air commanders, aware of mounting bomber losses in daylight raids, began pressing for a solution that could transform the Mustang into a truly strategic asset. This turning point came when Rolls-Royce engineers, in cooperation with North American Aviation, fitted the Mustang with the Merlin 61 engine, the same power plant used in later Spitfire variants. Testing of the Merlin-powered Mustang in 1942 immediately revealed the aircraft's untapped potential. The new power plant provided exceptional performance at altitudes above 20,000 feet, with a top speed exceeding 430 miles per hour and vastly improved climb rates. This configuration, later designated P-51B and P-51C in American service, was capable of escorting heavy bombers from British bases to targets deep inside Germany and back, a task no existing Allied fighter could reliably accomplish. As these upgraded Mustangs began to roll off production lines, the U.S. 8th Air Force prepared to integrate them into its strategic bombing campaign. While the earlier Allison-powered variants continued to serve in secondary theaters and reconnaissance roles, the Merlin-powered Mustang would soon become the centerpiece of Allied air operations in Europe. Its range, speed, and firepower promised to change the calculus of the air war, protecting bombers on missions as far as Berlin and crippling the Luftwaffe's ability to contest Allied air superiority. Before it could earn its reputation as the fighter that won the skies, the Mustang first had to prove itself in the crucible of sustained, high-intensity combat. As 1943 dawned, the newly enhanced aircraft was about to enter the skies over Europe not as a specialist tool, but as a decisive weapon poised to tilt the balance of air power irreversibly in the Allies' favor. The P-51 Mustang's transformation into the Allies' primary long-range escort fighter began in earnest in late 1943, as P-51B and P-51C variants equipped with the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine arrived in Europe. These aircraft, assigned to the 8th Air Force, immediately began flying escort missions for B-17 Flying Fortress and B-24 Liberator bombers conducting daylight raids deep into German territory. Prior to their arrival, bomber losses on unescorted missions had reached unsustainable levels, with casualty rates of up to 20% on certain operations. The Mustang's unprecedented range, exceeding 600 kilometers with drop tanks, allowed it to accompany bombers all the way to targets like Berlin, Leipzig, and the Ruhr, fundamentally altering the air war over Europe. In combat, the Mustang proved not only capable of reaching the target, but also of dominating the Luftwaffe's frontline fighters. Its combination of speed, climb rate, and maneuverability allowed it to challenge Bf-109s and FW-190s on equal terms, while its 6 50-caliber M2 Browning machine guns provided devastating firepower. Escort pilots developed aggressive tactics, patrolling far ahead of bomber streams to intercept enemy fighters before they could reach the vulnerable bombers. These fighter sweeps often turned into offensive operations in their own right, eroding German air defenses through constant attrition. The Mustang's arrival coincided with the Allies' push for round-the-clock bombing, a strategy aimed at breaking German industrial capacity. While RAF Bomber Command attacked by night, the U.S. 8th Air Force pressed daylight precision raids, made possible only because of the Mustang's protection. By early 1944, as P-51 units expanded, the effectiveness of German air defenses began to collapse. Luftwaffe fighter losses spiked dramatically, with some units losing over half their operational strength within weeks due to Mustang-led escort missions. This shift paved the way for operations like Big Week in February 1944, when sustained bombing crippled the German aircraft industry and further reduced the Luftwaffe's ability to mount coordinated resistance. The Mustang also proved adaptable in combat roles beyond escort. Pilots frequently used its speed and agility to engage in strafing attacks on enemy airfields, convoys, and rail networks during return flights, maximizing its battlefield impact. Its range enabled the Allies to project air power far beyond what had previously been possible, forcing the Luftwaffe to stretch its defenses thin and engage in costly battles far from their supply bases. Operational setbacks were relatively few but not absent. The Mustang's liquid-cooled engine, while efficient, was vulnerable to damage. A single well-placed shot could disable the cooling system and force a pilot to bail out. Furthermore, early P-51B and C models suffered from visibility issues due to their frame canopies, prompting the development of the P-51D with a bubble canopy and improved handling. Despite these challenges, the aircraft's overall combat effectiveness outweighed its vulnerabilities, and it quickly became the standard by which other Allied fighters were measured. By mid-1944, the Mustang had secured air superiority over Western Europe. Luftwaffe pilots began referring to bomber formations escorted by Mustangs as fliegende Festungen mit Schwanz, flying fortresses with tails, acknowledging the near impossibility of penetrating bomber formations protected by the new fighter. The P-51's dominance was so complete that by the time of the D-Day landings in June 1944, Allied aircraft faced minimal German interference during the invasion, ensuring uninterrupted air cover for ground forces. As the war progressed into its final year, the Mustang's role continued to evolve. It participated in every major campaign in Europe, from the push into France and the Low Countries to the final assaults on the German heartland. By late 1944, it was not just a guardian of bombers, but a spearhead for the Allied drive across the continent, conducting relentless offensive operations that left the Luftwaffe incapable of contesting the skies. The evolution of the Mustang during the final years of the war was marked by rapid development of specialized variants, each designed to meet specific operational needs across multiple theaters. The most iconic version, the P-51D, became the definitive Mustang, featuring a redesigned bubble canopy for improved visibility, a strengthened fuselage, and an upgraded armament of 6 50-caliber Browning machine guns with increased ammunition capacity. Powered by the Packard-built version of the Rolls-Royce Merlin V1650 engine, the P-51D combined high-altitude performance, long range, and robust firepower, making it the preferred escort for strategic bombing campaigns. More than 8,000 units of this model alone were produced, forming the backbone of Allied air superiority efforts from mid-1944 onward. Beyond the standard escort role, the Mustang underwent modifications for specialized combat and support duties. The P-51K, a close variant of the P-51D, featured a different propeller and minor adjustments for production efficiency. Reconnaissance models, designated F6, replaced some armament with cameras and extended fuel tanks, allowing for deep penetration photo missions over Germany and occupied Europe. These reconnaissance Mustangs provided crucial intelligence on troop movements, industrial targets, and post-strike damage assessment, often flying unescorted due to their speed and range. Ground attack adaptations also became increasingly common as the Luftwaffe's threat diminished. Many late-war Mustangs were equipped with rockets and bombs, using their precision and agility to strike armored columns, rail yards, and supply depots ahead of advancing Allied armies. Their ability to carry up to 1,000 pounds of ordnance, combined with their survivability, made them a valuable supplement to dedicated fighter bombers like the P-47 Thunderbolt. International service expanded during and after the war. In addition to the RAF, which continued operating upgraded Mustang variants, the aircraft was supplied to Allied air forces in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and several European nations. These operators utilized the Mustang in varied roles, from bomber escort to maritime patrol, benefiting from its versatility and ease of maintenance relative to more complex fighters. Technological refinements also continued beyond combat modifications. Engineers experimented with improved drop tanks, aerodynamic tweaks, and even prototype conversions into naval fighters for potential carrier operations, though the latter never entered mass production. Post-war research explored jet-assisted takeoffs and laminar flow optimizations, with lessons from the Mustang influencing the design of early jet fighters. Despite its success, the Mustang was not immune to the pressures of rapid aviation advancement. By 1945, jet-powered aircraft like the German Me-262 demonstrated that piston-engine fighters were nearing obsolescence in air superiority roles. However, the Mustang's operational range, low maintenance costs, and adaptability ensured its continued relevance in the immediate post-war years, where it transitioned into air forces worldwide as a frontline and later reserve aircraft. As the war drew to a close, the Mustang had secured its reputation as the most effective propeller-driven fighter of the conflict, combining speed, range, firepower, and production efficiency in a single platform. These qualities would allow it to outlive many of its contemporaries, bridging the gap between the piston and jet eras while shaping the doctrines of air power that would dominate the mid-20th century. Its legacy, however, was not limited to technology and tactics, as the Mustang would soon become a global icon of Allied air power, serving in countless air forces and conflicts beyond the Second World War. After the end of the Second World War, the P-51 Mustang transitioned from a wartime necessity to a cornerstone of post-war military aviation, securing a legacy that extended well beyond 1945. Its combination of long range, high speed, and adaptability ensured that it remained in frontline service during the early Cold War period, even as jet-powered fighters began to dominate the skies. The Mustang was quickly integrated into the newly established United States Air Force, where it was redesignated the F-51 and continued to serve as a primary fighter in regions where jet aircraft were either unavailable or impractical due to logistical constraints. One of the Mustang's most significant post-war contributions came during the Korean War, 1950-1953. At the outset of the conflict, jet fighters like the F-80 Shooting Star and F-86 Sabre were available in limited numbers, while their operational range restricted their utility for ground attack missions. The Mustang, by contrast, was immediately deployable and highly effective in close air support roles. F-51Ds flew countless sorties, strafing and bombing enemy positions, bridges, and supply convoys. While vulnerable to MiG-15 jet fighters, their ability to operate from rough airstrips near the front lines and carry substantial ordnance loads made them indispensable during the war's early phases. By 1951, Mustangs were gradually phased out of air-to-air combat but continued as ground attack workhorses until more jet-powered strike aircraft became available. Internationally, the Mustang found new life across dozens of air forces, from Europe to Latin America and Asia. Countries such as Sweden, Switzerland, Israel, South Korea, and the Dominican Republic integrated the aircraft into their fleets, using it for air defense, training, and even combat. In some nations, Mustangs remained in active service into the 1960s, a testament to their durability, ease of maintenance, and cost-effectiveness compared to emerging jet fighters. Many were also sold as surplus to private owners, sparking the birth of the warbird restoration movement that continues to preserve these aircraft today. Beyond combat, the Mustang influenced aviation design and doctrine. Its emphasis on range and efficiency informed early jet fighter development, as engineers sought to combine speed with extended operational reach. The lessons learned from its laminar flow wing and radiator system would carry over into post-war designs, while its combat record reinforced the necessity of long-range escorts for strategic bombing, a principle that shaped U.S. Air Force planning during the nuclear age. Culturally, the Mustang became a lasting symbol of Allied air power. Veterans' accounts, wartime newsreels, and post-war films solidified its image as the aircraft that allowed the Allies to achieve air supremacy in Europe. Numerous examples were preserved in museums, displayed at air shows, and even used in racing, where their speed and agility made them favorites at events like the Reno Air Races. Private collectors and restorers ensured that the aircraft remained not just a relic but a living reminder of a pivotal era in aviation history. While eventually eclipsed by jet technology, the Mustang's enduring presence in combat, training, and heritage roles underscores its significance as more than a product of its time. It bridged the gap between the piston and jet ages, embodied the rapid innovation of the Second World War, and left a lasting imprint on military aviation. By the time the last operational Mustangs were retired from active military service in the early 1980s, the aircraft had served for over 4 decades, a lifespan few fighters could match, solidifying its reputation as one of the most iconic and consequential aircraft ever built. Despite its celebrated role as a frontline fighter, the Mustang's history also included lesser-known missions and experimental applications that extended its influence beyond conventional combat roles. During the late stages of the Second World War and the immediate post-war years, several P-51 airframes were modified for research and testing, providing valuable data for the emerging jet age. Some were used by the U.S. military and the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACA, as testbeds for laminar flow research, high-speed flight experiments, and aerodynamic innovations that would later shape early jet fighter designs like the F-86 Sabre. These test aircraft often carried specialized instrumentation and were flown to explore airflow dynamics at near transonic speeds, pushing the limits of piston-powered flight. The Mustang was also adapted for unconventional operational uses. Certain airframes were converted for drone control, guiding unmanned aircraft used as aerial targets or for hazardous reconnaissance missions. In some cases, stripped-down Mustangs served as chase planes for experimental rocket and jet aircraft, ensuring safety during test flights by monitoring performance and relaying real-time observations to engineers on the ground. Although these roles kept the Mustang largely out of the public eye, they demonstrated its flexibility and continued relevance as aviation rapidly evolved. Several secretive or short-lived projects sought to expand the Mustang's potential even further. Concepts for heavily armed ground attack variants equipped with larger caliber weapons and additional armor were briefly pursued but ultimately abandoned as jet aircraft began to dominate close air support roles. Naval adaptations for carrier operations, tested in limited numbers, also failed to advance to production due to the growing preference for dedicated carrier-based fighters like the F-8F Bearcat and later jet-powered aircraft. Reflections from pilots and engineers who worked with the Mustang in these capacities often emphasized its reliability and forgiving flight characteristics, traits that made it an ideal platform for experimentation. Test pilots noted that the Mustang's predictable handling allowed them to focus on experimental objectives without the distraction of unstable flight behavior, a quality not always present in the early jet aircraft they were helping to develop. These unseen chapters contributed to the Mustang's reputation as more than just a wartime weapon. It became a bridge between eras, providing the foundation for technologies and tactics that would define post-war aviation. Its service in research, testing, and support roles highlighted its enduring utility even as the military landscape shifted towards supersonic flight and nuclear-era strategy. By the time the Mustang's military career drew to a close, its impact extended far beyond its iconic role as the fighter that escorted bombers to Berlin. It had shaped the development of future aircraft, inspired generations of pilots, and established itself as a living symbol of rapid innovation under the pressures of global war. The P-51 Mustang was not only the fighter that won the skies of the Second World War, but also a critical stepping stone toward the technological and doctrinal advances that would define the next age of aerial warfare. The P-51 Mustang's cultural and historical significance solidified as it transitioned from active service into a preserved icon of aviation history. Its reputation as the fighter that enabled Allied dominance over Europe became central to post-war narratives, celebrated in documentaries, memoirs, and historical accounts. Veterans recalled the Mustang not only as a life-saving escort, but as a machine that gave them confidence in the face of long, perilous missions. Its sleek design, distinctive sound, and combat record elevated it to a legendary status, making it a symbol of both American industrial ingenuity and Allied cooperation during the war. Museums around the world quickly recognized the Mustang's historical importance. Institutions such as the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, the Imperial War Museum, and numerous smaller aviation museums across Europe and North America acquired preserved examples. Many of these aircraft were restored to flight-worthy condition, ensuring that the Mustang would continue to be seen and heard at air shows for decades. Its performance in the civilian sphere extended beyond static displays. Racing pilots in the post-war Reno air races and similar competitions heavily modified surplus Mustangs, pushing their speeds far beyond wartime limits and cementing their reputation as high-performance legends even outside a military context. The aircraft's enduring appeal also lay in its symbolism. For the United States and its allies, the Mustang came to represent the turning point in the air war, the moment when strategic bombing became sustainable and the Luftwaffe's grip on European skies was broken. For aviation historians, it marked the culmination of piston engine fighter development, showcasing how a combination of innovative aerodynamics, reliable engineering, and transatlantic collaboration could produce an aircraft that redefined its era. Beyond museums and racing, surviving Mustangs became prized possessions for private collectors, many of whom meticulously restored the aircraft to original specifications. These restorations not only preserved the type for future generations, but also provided opportunities for new pilots to experience firsthand the handling and performance that wartime aviators had praised. Airshow demonstrations, often flown by skilled veterans or experienced civilians, allowed audiences to hear the iconic roar of the Packard Merlin engine and witness the Mustang's agility in the sky, keeping the aircraft's legacy alive as a living artifact rather than a silent exhibit. Cinematically, the Mustang found a place in films and television programs that revisited the Second World War, reinforcing its image as an integral part of Allied victory. Documentaries and feature films frequently highlighted its role in escorting bombers and sweeping the skies clear of enemy fighters, often casting it as a hero in its own right. Its distinct silhouette, long nose, and bubble canopy became visual shorthand for Allied air supremacy in the final years of the conflict. By the late 20th century, the P-51 Mustang was no longer just a historical artifact, but a cultural icon. It bridged the worlds of aviation heritage, popular media, and living history, embodying the technological leap and international cooperation that had defined the Allied war effort. Even as jet fighters became the standard bearers of air power, the Mustang retained its place as a reminder of the ingenuity and urgency that characterized the last great era of piston-driven combat aviation, an era it had in many ways defined and ultimately dominated. The Mustang's post-war story extended into conflicts and operations far removed from its original mission, underscoring the aircraft's adaptability even as the jet age accelerated. In many nations, particularly those rebuilding their air forces on limited budgets, the Mustang became a cornerstone of defense and training. Surplus P-51Ds were supplied through U.S. military aid programs to countries such as South Korea, Israel, and numerous Latin American states, where they performed roles ranging from air policing to combat operations well into the 1950s and 1960s. These aircraft, though technically outclassed by emerging jets, were invaluable for nations lacking the infrastructure or finances to maintain advanced supersonic fighters. In several regional conflicts, the Mustang returned to battle. During Israel's War of Independence in 1948, hastily acquired P-51s flew strike and escort missions, supporting ground offensives and countering enemy aircraft. South Korea employed Mustangs extensively during the Korean War, where they remained critical for ground attack and close air support, operating from improvised airstrips near the front lines. In Central and South America, Mustangs flew counterinsurgency and border patrol missions, where their range and payload allowed them to operate in environments unsuited to heavier or more fragile aircraft. Some Mustangs were also adapted for peacetime and experimental purposes outside of combat. Civilian-owned examples became central to the emerging warbird movement, with many restored for air racing and exhibition flying. In the Reno air races, heavily modified Mustangs, stripped of military equipment fitted with streamlined cowlings and boosted engines, achieved speeds exceeding 500 miles per hour, pushing the limits of piston engine performance and extending the aircraft's reputation for speed and reliability. Though its military career waned by the 1960s, the Mustang's operational presence continued in specialized forms. Some nations used the aircraft as advanced trainers or in maritime patrol roles, leveraging its endurance and adaptability. Others retained Mustangs as reserve fighters, extending their service lives into the 1970s. Even as supersonic jets rendered piston engine fighters obsolete in frontline combat, the Mustang's combination of low operating costs and versatility ensured it remained useful for nations with limited resources or specific niche requirements. Veterans and aviation enthusiasts often highlighted this extended service as a testament to the Mustang's original design qualities. Its airframe, though conceived under the pressures of 1940, remained structurally sound and adaptable for decades. Mechanics praised its straightforward maintenance compared to many early jets, and pilots valued its predictable handling and endurance, which allowed them to focus on missions without the burden of temperamental systems common in newer aircraft. By the time the final operational Mustangs were retired from military service in the early 1980s, the aircraft had served in over 50 air forces and participated in conflicts spanning 4 decades. Its longevity reflected more than nostalgia. It was the product of a design that, while conceived for a specific war, proved universally adaptable to shifting strategic and technological landscapes. In this extended life beyond its wartime fame, the Mustang became not just a relic of the Second World War, but a global workhorse, remembered as much for its post-war versatility as for its decisive role in winning the skies of the 1940s. The P-51 Mustang's enduring reputation as the fighter that won the skies rests not only on its wartime record but on the broader legacy it left for aviation and military history. At its peak in 1944 and 1945, it served as the linchpin of the Allied strategic air campaign, ensuring the success of deep penetration bombing raids by making them survivable. By escorting heavy bombers to Berlin, Leipzig, and beyond, the Mustang neutralized the Luftwaffe's capacity to disrupt Allied offensives, paving the way for ground advances and crippling Germany's industrial base. Its presence reshaped the balance of air power in Europe, transforming daylight bombing from a gamble into a decisive instrument of war. Technologically, the Mustang represented the culmination of piston-engine fighter development. Its laminar flow wing, use of the Meredith effect radiator, and seamless integration of the Merlin engine set new benchmarks for aerodynamic and mechanical efficiency. These features, developed under the pressures of wartime urgency, influenced the transition to the jet age by providing lessons in efficiency, stability, and range. Its ability to combine long-distance reach with superior combat performance demonstrated the value of designing fighters not just for dogfights but for strategic missions, shaping future doctrines for long-range interception and escort in the nuclear and Cold War eras. Culturally and symbolically, the Mustang transcended its original function as a weapon. To Allied pilots, it became synonymous with survival, freedom, and the turning of the tide in Europe. Its silhouette and distinctive engine note remain iconic even decades after its retirement, symbolizing both the technological innovation of the era and the Allied victory it helped secure. The aircraft's enduring popularity among collectors, historians, and enthusiasts reflects its dual identity as a historical artifact and a living representation of aviation's golden age. The Mustang story also underscores the collaborative nature of wartime innovation. Conceived in the United States, refined with British input, and powered by a Merlin engine licensed for American production, it embodied the transatlantic cooperation that defined much of the Allied war effort. Its success demonstrated that rapid, cooperative development could yield solutions capable of overcoming even the most entrenched strategic challenges, a lesson that carried into post-war aerospace projects and alliances. By the time the last Mustangs were retired from active service, their impact had stretched across 4 decades, multiple continents, and a spectrum of roles far beyond what its creators envisioned in 1940. The aircraft had not only altered the course of the Second World War, but had also influenced how nations thought about air power, fighter design, and global force projection. Today, with many restored examples still flying at air shows, museums, and commemorative events, the P-51 Mustang continues to embody the ingenuity, urgency, and cooperation that defined its creation, and the enduring spirit of the pilots who flew it. As a result, the Mustang stands not merely as a machine of war, but as one of aviation's most significant achievements. A bridge between eras, a decisive instrument in global conflict, and an enduring reminder of how technology and necessity combined to change the fate of the skies.